on the topic of industrial music that fits really well with the theme of the game, Airmech is a free-to-play arena kind of mech combat kind of game. It's a little difficult to describe, but the easiest comparison that some listeners may pick up on, if you're as old as we fucking are, back in the PlayStation days, there was a game on PlayStation 1, I believe it was, that was called G Police. And it was not really anything to write home about, but it had this really fantastic multiplayer mode that had really early MOBA elements to it. You were this flying police helicopter that could turn into a giant mech, and there were creep waves that sort of spread across the level, and your opponent was like also a flying robot kind of thing. Very Transformers inspired, and that's essentially what Airmech is. Except the creep waves are things that you pick out. So I'm specializing in tanks or miniguns or whatever. But the thing that most stands out about Airmech is the Frontline Assembly soundtrack. Frontline Assembly got started in the early 80s, 1981, I want to believe. The founding member of Frontline Assembly, Bill Lieb, was very briefly in Skinny Puppy, also another industrial music pioneer. Frontline Assembly has gone through a number of facelifts over the years, changing styles subtly here and there, but retaining that sort of central industrial kind of focused core. When you say the name industrial music, Frontline Assembly is a name that should come up. And the Airmech soundtrack is no exception. Frontline Assembly also kind of walks that very kind of that line between electronic and electronica. I know Synther is probably very familiar with a lot of the bands that I'm talking about for that reason. And Frontline Assembly also, in addition to being an industrial band that makes great soundtracks like Airmech and producing, I believe they were also featured on the soundtrack for the original Blair Witch film with their song Laughing Pain. But in addition to that, Bill Lieb and Rise Fulber, the sort of two central members of Frontline Assembly over the years, also kind of moonlight as Delirium, which is a very electronic music project that is a significant departure from their normal music. I
used to listen to some Delirium back in the day.
Yeah,
they were pretty good.
They had a big hit with Sarah McLachlan. That was
Silence.
Kind of. Yep, yeah. Exactly. A huge hit and really put them on the map. They actually make jokes at times about how the Frontline Assembly is paid for by Delirium money for that reason. But Frontline Assembly's soundtrack for Airmech is absolutely amazing. They ended up making the soundtrack for the, in addition to Airmech having the sort of arena kind of mode, there's a single player version of the game called Warmech. They did the soundtrack for that as well, both of which are on Spotify to stream and are absolutely fantastic. They blend the best parts of industrial music and the best parts of Frontline Assembly, the very distinct style they have, with some of the more softer electronic elements. And the track that we'll be playing that you hear now is the title from Airmech. You'll notice, notes of the sort of electronic kind of sweeping background sounds, the sweeping synth that kind of comes in, and it's really something special, and it grabbed me as soon as I started it. I had no idea Frontline Assembly had done the soundtrack, and then the moment that I hit the menu, I was like, this is great. I got to find out who this is, and was pleasantly surprised to find out that it was a band that I already really liked and really enjoyed.